The All-Star break is officially behind us. The stretch run begins tonight. The Padres in Washington, D.C. facing the Nationals. We have a lot to talk about here on Friar Territory, including the 5 key storylines that will determine the fate of the Padres for the rest of the season. And to do that, I am joined by a very, very special guest today, the one and only Tony Gwynn Jr. Tony, thank you for joining me.
What's up, Kyle? How you doing?
Doing great. Glad to have you. Before we get started, you and I have had a lot of conversations and interactions over the years, and I feel like I have to share this story. The one that stands out most in my mind of all the conversations we've had over the years, or I should say interactions, back in Cooperstown in 2018, we were both covering the Hall of Fame induction. There was the year Trevor Hoffman was inducted, Chipper Jones, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., just this incredible class. And to give everyone some background, Hall of Fame weekend, it's a blast, but it's very, very hectic. You have a lot of ex-players, the inductees, their families, league officials, media, all packed into this very small town and very small spaces. So it can get a little hectic. And I remember we were in the press conference room and I forget what it was. I had to get somewhere. I was stressed a little bit, kind of just tunnel vision on where I had to get. And I was walking out and you were by the exit and you were like, "Hey Kyle, what's up?" And I was just so focused on where I had to get to go. I remember I just kind of gave you like a little chin nod, head up. And I walked out and I got about halfway out and I realized, crap, did I just big time Tony Gwynn Jr.?
Hey, listen, I recognize, especially during that time of year, how hectic things are. So I didn't take it personal. I knew exactly what was probably going on in your mind. You probably had somewhere to get to. All good.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you forgiving me because it was just one of those moments afterwards, like, damn it. so it's all
that
good.
Can happen. That can happen when you're in a Hall of Fame. I mean, there's so many, baseball gods there, if you will, that you can get lost in the sauce a little bit.
Definitely, no question about it. Tony, the Padres open up their post-break slate here tonight. And before we dive into some of the individual storylines, I want to talk about the big picture. The Padres are 52-44, second place in the NL West. Every team has highs and lows over the course of the season. This year's Padres, it's been some very high highs and some very low lows. When you take a step back, what is your overall assessment of the team and where they stand at this point?
I think you got to kind of take a 20,000-foot view of this ball club in order to assess that. And, I think when you're assessing that in general, you're looking at health, you're looking at, how teams have played over a long stretch of time, the consistency of it. Yeah. And when you really look at all of those things, the Padres hadn't really checked a lot of those boxes. They haven't been healthy outside of the short portion of March and all of April. They really haven't been that consistent offensively. And so given all of that, 8 games above 500, second place in the National League West, a tough division, by the way. They're sitting pretty good. I think ultimately health is going to be a factor in this.
Oh, yeah.
And I think what you saw right before the break, the last week before break, was you started to see that offense kind of reemerging into what we saw in April. It hadn't quite got to that level, but there are signs that they are starting to come out of it. And I would say all in all, when you look at the first half, you got to be, if you're in that locker room, if you are in that organization, you got to feel pretty good given those circumstances that I mentioned earlier.
No question about it. But as you mentioned, you want to see things turn around. The current level of production is not sustainable if this wants to be a playoff team. And that leads us into probably the number one storyline and the top thing on everyone's mind with the Padres. Which version of Fernando Tatis Jr. will the Padres get here post-break? We saw when the season began that first month, he looked like the best version of Fernando Tatis Jr. we had ever seen. Not just one of the best players in baseball, but the prohibitive favorite for National League MVP.
No doubt.
And then he hit 211 over a 7-week stretch. You could see it in his demeanor, his plate discipline, just everything was kind of falling apart. We saw him start to turn it around. And to your point about the Padres offense looking like maybe they were snapping out of it. His last 15 games going into the All-Star break, Tatis hit 327 with a 456 on-base percentage, 455 slugging percentage. Most importantly, I thought more walks than strikeouts. We really saw him tighten up the plate discipline. As we head into the post-break stretch here, what version do you think the Padres will get of Fernando Tatis Jr.? Because I think above all else, that's going to determine their fate by a pretty substantial margin.
I mean, unfortunately, I don't know that there's an answer to that particular question. I think
Yeah.
um, Toddy has started to show, like you said, those signs of getting back to it.
Yeah.
Plate discipline has tightened up.
Yeah.
And I don't body language and stuff like that. I don't pay much attention to it because I know when you're not playing well and when you're not doing things to help the team, baseball's not that fun. It sucks. It really
Yeah.
does. Even at the big league level, when you're not playing at the level you expect to play, it's not that fun. And I think that's everybody. I don't think that's just Toddy, but
Yeah.
I think those signs in particular, and it's not the average, it's not the hits, it's the walks
Yeah.
and kind of just the approach at the plate that I think is the key for him. When we saw Toddy at his best, he wasn't chasing, and he just made it so hard on pitchers to do anything. Either you were going to walk him, or he was going to put a ball in the seats, or he's going to do something electrifying. And I think as he started to struggle and his strike zone discipline started to kind of dissipate, that's when you saw the struggle. When Toddy's locked in terms of how he's seeing the ball, I don't pay much attention to the mechanic parts because when
Yeah.
he's seeing the ball well, there aren't very many players as good as him. And in terms of which version we get, I think we're all hopeful that we get the version that we saw in April and as we started to go into break, because that version, and let's just be very, very clear, for the Padres to have the success that they're trying to have,
Yeah.
Jackson's going to have to be Jackson, Manny, who's been himself all season, and Toddy. Those three guys, to me, are the key
Yeah.
to making this offense be prolific like we saw the second half of last season.
No question about it. I am bullish on Tatis. Look, I'm not going to say he's going to hit 365 with an 1100 OPS the rest of the year like he did that first month of the season, but we're seeing the good signs. You talk about when he's right, it's when he's controlling the strike zone. When he's not right, you see him chasing those sliders down and away and those sinkers down and in. That's always been his kryptonite, the stuff below the zone, dating back to his prospect days. And I think just seeing, again, better approach, more consistent contact, more walks and strikeouts, and seeing him move a little bit again. We've seen more activity on the bases. These are all good signs. I do think he's trending up, and we will see a better version of Tatis than we've seen.
Yeah.
Tony, another player that we haven't mentioned, but in a lot of ways is key to the Padres' offensive success, is Xander Bogaerts. Bogaerts, as we know, when he's right, is one of the more, I wouldn't say impactful, but he's one of the better contact doubles on base guys in baseball, even at his age. For most of this season, just objectively, he was one of the worst hitters in baseball. Where he ranked OPS-wise, just the overall production, it was really, really concerning, especially given the Padres have 8 years left on his 11-year, $280 million deal. But recently, he's been better. So over the last month, Xander Bogaerts has actually hit 388, 467, 550. A lot of doubles, couple homers. It has been a really good month for Xander Bogaerts, and Lord knows the Padres need it. Because even if Merrill, Tatis, Machado are great at the top, you got to have guys who can still hurt you 5, 6, 7. Where are you in terms of Xander Bogaerts and what he will be able to provide the Padres the rest of the season offensively?
I think bullish is probably the word that I would use. I've even prior to the month, I contend that you saw those signs before the hits started coming. I mean, he was lining out a lot, but it was marred in the slow start. So people kind of just group all of that together. Yeah. But I would say probably 3 weeks, maybe even a month before that, you started to see some signs of just harder contact. He was having no luck at all during that stretch.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden, that's a consistent thing in baseball. When you continue to do things right, even when you're making outs, eventually it starts to go your way. And I think what we've seen from Xander is a kind of a continuation. All of a sudden, some of those balls that he was lining out are finding gaps. They're finding outfield grass. And, confidence in sports in general is like it should be one of the highest priorities, because when guys are confident, it doesn't necessarily even matter sometimes if the mechanics are off. They find ways because they believe they can go up to the plate and help themselves. And Xander, I think you made a great point. He's particularly important as you start getting beyond the 5 spot in the lineup, 6, 7, 8, 9, where the Padres, quite frankly, have struggled
Yeah.
I think having a guy like Bogey, whether he's hitting fifth or sixth, a guy like Cronenworth who started to kind of pick it up as well,
Yeah.
that helps the bottom of the lineup, which there in essence helps get more opportunities for the guys at the top of the lineup who are, as we already mentioned, are vital to the Padres offense and them having a whole lot of success.
I want to dive into you with this because you've been in every game, home, road, you're part of the broadcast team, you've seen it all. Xander Bogaerts' hitting mechanics, when he's struggling, we saw him out in front a lot, swing and missing out in front a lot, rolling over a lot of ground balls. Mike Schultz talked about it, and this is true for every hitter. You're at your best when you're balanced and driving through the baseball. Do you feel like his hitting mechanics have improved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. No question. I think Xander is already a guy who I won't say hits off of his front leg, but he is often on it, right? And when early, he was oftentimes over it, which leads to the roll over to third or to short, and him not being able to stay through the baseball. And what I think you started to see in that evidence I was talking about even before the numbers was he identified him and Victor Rodriguez identified what the issue was. And it just seems like he's been very cognizant of that. And as he has started to hit up against that front side as being on top of it, all of a sudden you're starting to see the consistency. And you're seeing that Xander that I think many Padre fans have been like craving to see. You're seeing it more consistently, especially in this last month.
No question about it. Especially watching from the side, you can see the noticeable difference.
That's the easiest way to see it. From the front, it's really hard to see. It kind of just looks like his natural free-flowing swing, but he is now often, especially the side views we've seen over the last 3 weeks, he's hitting against that front side, and it's allowing him to really drive through the baseball, stay through it, as opposed to snapping that top hand over.
Scott, you have a Bilt rewards card, right?
I do, Kratz. I pay a lot of money in rent, and now I get something for that. There's no cost to join, and just by paying rent, you unlock flexible points that can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and much more. When you pay rent through Bilt, you unlock two powerful benefits. First, you earn one of the industry's most valuable points on rent every month. No matter where you live or where your landlord is, your rent now works for you, and you gain access to exclusive neighborhood benefits in your city. Bilt's neighborhood benefits are things like extra points on dining out, complimentary post-workout shakes, and much more. Unique experiences that only Bilt members can access. And when you're ready to travel, Bilt points can be converted to your favorite miles and hotel points around the world, meaning your rent can literally take you places. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, what are you waiting for? Start paying rent through Bilt and take advantage of your neighborhood benefits by going to joinbilt.com/foul. That's joinbilt.com/FOUL. Make sure to use our URL so that they know we sent you.
Yu Darvish made his return. He's made 2 abbreviated starts. And look, even at his advanced age, we know that when he is right, he is still capable of giving you frontline starter production and over longer outings too. He showed last year he is still very capable of going 6, 7, even further at times. The Padres not only could use starting pitching reinforcements just like every team can, but they need length in particular because his bullpen has been heavily used. How much do you think Yu Darvish will be able to give the Padres, just given he is coming off of elbow inflammation, his return was delayed, he is up there in years? What are you expecting him to give them here after the All-Star break?
It was so interesting about Yu is that he's missed a lot of time, and in that time you can forget how effective he is when he's on the mound, right? And so he comes back, and you naturally are guarded because you don't know what to expect. He's had some kind of setbacks during this process where he's had to kind of slow it down a little bit. But once he gets back out there, you start to remember really fast like how good he is and how more importantly how intelligent he is when it comes to pitching. And I think there may be some ideas of how you get to the end with Darb. I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's some type of 6-man rotation down this second half, because you obviously want to have Darb available. You also have some other pitchers that are young, going to need to be built up. I mean, we've already seen Kolek go down in part because he's maybe have already hit a wall. That's probably going to happen for Bogaerts at some point. And so I can see a scenario in which the Padres invoke some type of 6-man rotation. They may not call it that, but I can 100% see that in order to try to get Darv. I think as we start to get into the second half, I think we'll be able to kind of read the tea leaves on how the Padres plan to attack it. But I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a 6-man rotation in order to try to give you the best opportunity to be as fresh as he can down the stretch when you need him most.
No question about it. Again, he's 38 years old. He turns 39 in August. This is his third straight injury-shortened season, so you have to be cognizant of the wear and tear. But you're right. I think getting him on a 6-man rotation, building in an extra day of rest with an off day somewhere, you can still get a very effective version of Yu Darvish. He still has the velo. He can still pitch. He can still throw a million different pitches at you. It's all there. Again, this is something I'm bullish on. I think he'll be able to give the Padres at least 10, 12, 14 starts of, 3.5 ERA, low threes. I think that's very feasible.
If he's healthy, I have no question that he can give that type of starts and those type of numbers. I wouldn't be surprised if they're even better than that if he has 13, 14 starts down the stretch.
Absolutely. And Tony, on a related note, this bullpen has been the key to the Padres season all year. The team would not be where they are without this bullpen. We talk about how many games they're down 2-0. The bullpen comes in, holds the line, gives the offense time to come back. That's been the source of so many of these 3-2, 4-2 comeback wins, none of which would have been possible if the bullpen didn't hold the line. The bullpen usage has been heavily concentrated in the core four: Jason Adam, Jeremiah Estrada, Adrian Morejon, Robert Suarez. Adam, Morejon, and Estrada are all on pace for 79 appearances this year, which typically that's a number that leads the league. Suarez is on pace for about 72, 73 appearances, which again would be top 10 in the league. So fatigue and weariness is something to watch for here. What are your thoughts on the bullpen and how it will hold up down the stretch, particularly this core four?
I think they'll be good. And here's why. I think you've started to see the Padres develop some other arms in real time. Dave Morgan is a guy that they brought in, especially here in that last week, as some of the core four, as you mentioned, were down. Some guys had to step into roles that they hadn't normally pitched in. And we've seen that now from Morgan a few times. I think them being able to kind of develop him in real time is going to be key. I think a guy like Sean Reynolds, who will sit down, I think he's going to factor into the bullpen as well. They've used him in a number of different situations to kind of get him ready. Because, listen, the reality is in a 162-game season, not only will you probably use all 40 men on your roster, but probably more at some point in order to get to the finish line. And then once you get to the tournament, obviously more off days, all that kind of thing kind of plays a role in it. But I think that their bullpen can be fine, especially if the starters get back to supporting. I think that's ultimately how you are going to buy time for those guys, is the starters got to pitch deeper in the games. And, the longer you go into the season and starters aren't doing that, you are running a high risk that the bullpen eventually falls apart due to fatigue. So I think those arms that the Padres have developed are going to be big, no doubt. But I also think that getting a guy like Yu Darvish back in regular form, getting a guy like Michael King back, who sounds like he's getting closer, will help tremendously in kind of alleviating some of the stress the bullpens had to take on.
No question about it. And it's a great point about David Morgan. I don't know if people have appreciated how good he's been. 2.14 ERA in 17 games. And again, we've seen him in some high leverage spots. Sean Reynolds, again, has been solid as well. 17 appearances. We've seen him go long. We've seen him go short. He's done some good things. The starting pitchers obviously are key. But another aspect to this I think is important is actually the offense. We've seen a lot of situations where, a pitcher might be doing okay, but it's a 1-1 game, 4 2/3, and Shohei Ohtani is coming up. Yeah. That forces Mike Shildt to be more aggressive and go to the bullpen. If it's a 5-1 game, the exact same situation in terms of who's coming to the plate, same number of pitches thrown, the starter stays in. So it all kind of ties together here.
100%. The offense starts putting up more runs for a little bit more breathing room. Yeah. It's less stress on the pitches whoever's in has to make. All of that is encompassing in helping the bullpen get some relief. You score more runs, there's a little more room. those guys, specifically those 4 guys you mentioned, they don't have to be the ones shouldering the load. Some other guys can get some work in. And so, it's all part of it. Starting pitching, getting deeper, the development of those guys we talked about, but also the offense being able to put some more runs on the board can help all of that.
So far, Tony, the top 4 storylines we talked about have all been about in-house guys. The trade deadline's coming up. We know AJ Preller will be aggressive at the trade deadline. He always is. So to me, the number 5 storyline that's going to determine the Padres' fate the rest of the season is who will they acquire at the deadline? Because I think we can agree that this team, while there's talent, certainly has holes that need to be addressed. When you look at this team right now, where are the top priorities for you in terms of what they should try and add at the deadline?
I think it's a couple of bats, honestly. Yeah. I think there was a lot of, talk about left field in particular. I think that's kind of quieted down as we've seen Gavin Sheets be able to be more than serviceable out there. But more importantly, his offense has certainly allowed for that conversation to not be so concentrated on just left field. I think it's more about a bat. If you can get a left fielder, obviously, I think that's someplace you want to go. It only is going to help your defense. But I just think it's bats in general in order to lengthen that lineup out. I think that's what it really boils down to. You look at the top 5 of the Padres lineup, you ain't going to find too many guys teams that have a better 5. And I think the separator in last year's team versus this year's team was that bottom part of the lineup. When you had guys like Solano, Peralta hitting at the bottom of the lineup, Higashioka, it helped turn the lineup over. And now all of a sudden these pitchers are having to deal with runners on. You're facing Toddy, you're facing Luis, you're facing Manny. And it's a lot of pressure. And a lot of times, you know what they say, pressure busts pipes. And so I think that is where a bat can come in. And if you can lengthen out that lineup one way or another, there's a ton of names that are out there on the rumor mill as the stove starts to heat up. Yeah. But I think that's where the Padres will be probably focused on. I would have said a probably an arm was likely to prior to kind of the news of Darv getting better and King starting to move in the right direction. I mean, don't get me wrong. You never know what AJ. There certainly could be an arm smuggled in there somehow. You know what I'm saying? But I think ultimately they'll focus on the bats is my guess.
Yeah. And they should. Priorities A, B, and C should be bats again. 2 bats to go in the starting lineup. I'd say you need another for the bench. I want to get your thoughts on the catching situation because, look, Martin Maldonado and Elias Diaz have not performed offensively. At the same time, this pitching staff has been excellent all year, and a big part of that is the work they have been doing behind the plate. And I know from, a manager's perspective, it's always a risk that, okay, yeah, we bring in a better hitter potentially, but we lose that connection with the pitchers. Where are you on potentially bringing in a new catcher mid-season who can provide more offensive thump?
I think it kind of depends on what those other bats are you're getting, right? I mean, I think you can handle what the catching position is giving you if indeed you are able to get some of those bats to kind of cover it up a little bit. You can kind of see the conundrum that the Astros had for quite a few years where they obviously weren't getting the offense they want, but on the flip side, the pitching was just phenomenal. And when you watch those games, especially as it pertains to Maldi, you can see the effect he has when he's out there behind the dish. You can 100% see it. And so I would say you could look to upgrade the catching position if that is the bat indeed that you are getting. But I think you got to be cautious. You really do, especially as it pertains to pitchers, man. They get a comfort with a guy and they don't want to move off of that, especially if they've had success with the guy as a lot of the pitching staff has had. And I think a lot of times we're thinking, starting pitchers, but just think about the success the bullpen has had, with those guys as well. And so I think you probably are looking to address the bat in a different way initially. And if it comes to the fact that it's the catching position, I think you obviously have to look at it.
All sorts of possible combinations and permutations out there. I'm sure AJ Preller will explore all of them. Tony, one final question before we get you out of here. The big one. The Padres are in the final National League wildcard spot as we sit here today. It is a tight race. for that final spot in the NL. Do you think the Padres get into the playoffs once this regular season is over? Are they in playoff position?
I do. I think so. I think, just going off of what we've seen in the past, all of Mike Shilt's teams, every single one of them plays way better in the second half than they do in the first half. Their record is tremendous in the second half. So that coupled with, just being around these guys all season long, despite the kind of valley they had been in offensively, these guys approach the game the same way every day. And I take solace in that there's no panic. These guys continue to believe, and you're starting to see some signs. I think this team's going to go on a run. I can't say that they're going to go on a run like they did last year, which was, amazing. But I think I think their best baseball is ahead of them still.
Absolutely. We shall see. And how these 5 storylines play out will go a long way in determining that. Tony, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your expertise and insight as always.
Appreciate you having me on, Kyle.
Once again, that was Tony Gwynn Jr., kind enough to join us from Washington, D.C. And look, there are a lot of reasons to be bullish on what the Padres can do in the second half. But again, it's also hard to completely buy in until they show it to you. Again, we've seen Fernando Tatis Jr. show it to us a little bit. We've seen Xander Bogaerts show it to us a little bit recently. You feel good about Manny Machado and Luis Suarez doing their thing. Gavin Sheets has been solid all year. So there are a lot of things to believe in. But again, they've got to improve the bottom of this lineup. They have to get more consistent offensively. And a big thing will be whether Tatis and Xander Bogaerts can keep it up. Tatis at the top, Bogaerts in the middle. That will go a long way toward determining the Padres' offensive future. Of course, Darvish in the bullpen will be key. And whoever the Padres acquire at the trade deadline, what impact they're able to make. It's all going to make an enormous difference in how the Padres post-break slate plays out. With that, there's one player in particular I do want to focus in on here for our DraftKings Player Spotlight. As we've talked about, the bullpen is so key to the Padres' postseason ambitions. And with that, I want to focus in on Robert Suarez. Suarez, as we know, when he's right, is one of the best closers in baseball. And he has been right for most of this season. But I do think it's important to note there has been a little bit of ups and downs recently. So Robert Suarez went through a rough stretch starting around mid-June. He had a stretch over 8 appearances where he had an ERA of 16.88, 5 1/3 innings, 15 hits allowed, 10 earned runs, nearly as many walks as strikeouts. It was really rough and concerning because you know how critical he is to the Padres' success. And frankly, with all the close games they're playing, it's hard for them to win if he's not on his A game. Luckily, things got better. His final 6 appearances going into the break, his final 5 appearances going into the break, he didn't allow a run. 5 innings, 1 hit, no walks, 6 strikeouts. So we saw Robert Suarez get back to being his best self going into the All-Star break. And yes, he was charged with a pair of runs during the All-Star game. I wouldn't worry about that. But I do think that when we talk about all the players who are going to be key to the Padres' fortunes, again, it's the guys we've talked about. It's Fernando Tatis Jr., it's Xander Bogaerts, it's Jackson Merrill, Manny Machado, Luis Suarez keeping it up. All the pitchers, again, Dylan Cease improving, Nick Pivetta keeping it up. This is a team that really needs everyone pulling in the same direction because, as we talked about, there's not really enough depth here to overcome it if multiple guys are struggling at the same time, which we've seen with this team. But again, the bullpen is why the Padres are where they are. And I do think Robert Suarez is going to be such a key player to watch as we go down the stretch here. Last year, Robert Suarez was dominant for most of the season, but we saw him have a few hiccups, especially in August and early September. The most memorable moment of that, of course, was when he gave up a grand slam to Parker Meadows against the Tigers. Tigers beat the Padres. In a lot of ways, that win is actually what catapulted the Tigers into the postseason and got their run started. The Padres, of course, were able to overcome it. They still had a great finish. And part of that was because they had some really good arms at the end of the bullpen who could come in when Suarez was struggling or tired. Again, the Tanner Scott acquisition was huge. The Jason Adam acquisition was huge. And once again, they have that dynamic again this year with Adam, with Estrada, with Morhone. But I do think this is going to be one of the key players to watch that maybe isn't being talked about enough, just because, again, there was that 8-game stretch where Robert Suarez really struggled. And when we've seen different stretches like that, and again, it happens to every player, but the Padres have such a thin margin for error. If he is struggling, it's going to go a long way toward determining, Do they get to 88, 89 wins, or are there 3 or 4 blown saves in there that brings them down to 85 wins, and that's the margin they miss the postseason by? I think at the end of the day, you do believe in Robert Suarez. You trust what he has shown throughout his career, what he is capable of, and we know that when he is right, he is one of the best, most dominant closers in baseball. I go back to Dave Roberts had the great line of, "I don't like when he's in the game." He and everyone else knows that Robert Suarez is capable of shutting down the best hitters in baseball. But that's when he's right. And again, the 5 games going into the All-Star break certainly brought down the concern level. And now it's just going to be key to see if he can maintain that coming out of the break during this very, very crucial stretch for the Padres and into the dog days of August and potentially early September and mid-September as we get into the stretch run. We will see. But either way, Robert Suarez will play a very, very big part of the Padres' success or failures as we go through the rest of the 2025 season. Once again, this has been the DraftKings Player Spotlight. There's a lot of great stuff going on at DraftKings right now. We encourage everyone to check it out, including their Pick 6. It's crazy simple. Just pick more or less on the stats for 2 or more of your favorite players, and boom, you are in the mix for some big cash prizes. Nail your picks and you are heating up. Pick 6 brings upside with payouts up to 500 times. Pick 6 from DraftKings is the most fun way to play fantasy sports. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code FOUL. That's code FOUL for new customers to get a special sign-up offer. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
All right, that will do it for this week's edition of Friar Territory. Special thanks to Tony Gwynn Jr. for joining us. Once again, subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, whatever platform you're watching and listening on. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment, like, all the good stuff, 5-star reviews. It helps us out big time. We appreciate it. We've got a lot more great stuff coming next week. Mike Cameron will be returning to the show. Heath Bell will be joining us. We're going to have lots about the trade deadline, all the prospects the Padres have, who are the players they should acquire, what's realistic, what's not in terms of trades. It's an exciting time in the baseball calendar, and we will have you covered here on Friar Territory. For Tony Gwynn Jr., I'm Kyle Glaser. Thank you for watching and listening. We'll see you next week.